my co-host Chapamon. Let me set up my
Hello.
second screen here. And tonight we don't have a lot of news, so we'll see what we can do. But if you're new to the podcast, welcome, and welcome to the both our channels, of course. But we're gonna be talking about content. What is it, or what isn't? It is not. Because there's a lot of games today promise a lot of content, and we do get a lot of stuff. But the question is, what exactly is that stuff, and does it constitute things that worth being known as content?
hmm
But before we get that, we're gonna have a couple of news. We start with the SRB announcement. This was last week, and I apologize for people who were following the podcast. We had to cancel last minute. It happens. Things beyond our control. And we had the SRB meeting with politicians and saying basically, oh, don't worry about this whole microtransaction thing. We're going to put a sticker on our games just like with everything else. We're a ratings board after all, saying that they has in-app purchases. Problem with that, of course, is that anything and everything that you buy after acquiring the license of the game constitutes an in-app purchase.
Yep. That's anywhere from single buy DLCs and expansions to loot boxes.
Yeah.
So that could be, and the SRB did address this issue that the reason why they didn't want to try to differentiate loot boxes with any other type of in-game purchases is because that they thought it would they think parents are essentially too stupid to understand the difference and might get confused by the labels. By well, what is microtransactions? What is a loot box? Trying to differentiate each in-game in-app purchase.
But the thing is that by saying in-app purchases, you are confusing the consumer because you don't know, okay, what exactly you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Because you may have one game where you're especially if you're talking about parents buying stuff for the kids, and kids say, I want to buy this expansion. It's like, okay, fine, go ahead, let's buy it together. But if your kid just grabs the credit card and puts $1,000 on it, in a couple of days or weeks or hours, whatever how long it takes, or depending on the game, you're like, oh, are all games designed in a way that you can do that? No, yes, no, maybe, you don't know, right? So, and actually, it's the other way around. I feel like they're not being very clear. They're not saying exactly what does that mean. It's just everything, which
Yep.
it means nothing.
Exactly.
Basically.
Like so Battlefront would fall in the same category as the game that I'm playing, the Digimon game that I've been playing, which just has like so far only one like downloadable content that's purchasable, which is just a single one-time purchase. And you get some extra Digimon. That's it. Like, oh, just one time and only one DLC, but that's comparable to having to pay to win the game.
Yeah, and also how you get these things. For example, you can get DLC on the store. If you're somebody who still buys a physical copy, you go into the store, you get to, I want this game, whatever, and you buy the box, even if it just has a code for download, you can go to the counter and say, I want this DLC. You can talk to someone, say, okay, we'll give you another code. You pay, say, $20, and that's it. Again, that's different from I'm playing in my game, and then advertising shows up, say, oh, by the way, do you want to have this stuff? Pay us $5 or 25 cents or whatever it's the exact amount. Boom, you got it. Pay another 25 cents, pay another $1 or $2 or $5. It's different things for different, and also what you get with it as well, right? And how the mechanics work. It doesn't explain any of that, and it doesn't make any distinctions. And it actually might hurt those designers who choose to just rely on DLC for the extra content and no go the microtransaction route.
Yeah.
And if there's no difference, might just put microtransactions in everything. It's just
yeah. Or well, also, what about a game that's just designed like just designed to be a single player experience, and then it gets popular enough to where like, oh, it becomes this smash hit, and like, oh, well, let's add an expansion, let's add a DLC. Does that mean that the SRB has to retroactively go back and change the rating on that game now?
Mm-hmm.
Put that little label on there?
Yeah, it's not a good deal. And of course, we're also dealing with the aftermath of the massacre in Parkland, Florida.
Yeah,
Uh,
so then uh our great president ordered a roundtable discussion of a few industry people, and then of course some, I guess you could call them concerned citizens maybe,
mhm.
but not really. They didn't really seem to be anybody that important.
And also, the president called for some kind of rating system on our video
Yeah.
games, which we just discussed. The SRB exactly came about in the 1990s to self regulate by putting a rating system on games. Mind you, rating systems do have problems. Again, problems of clarity, right? At times. And what falls and what and where. And I would point everybody to Super Bunny Hop's latest video on rating systems around the world. Let's see if I can find it here.
Yeah,
Super
I know. I noticed
Bunny
that
Hop.
a lot of European games have a different rating system. They go with PEGI whatever
Yeah,
rating.
the Pegasus system, which is yeah. Okay, let me. That was sorry about the audio. Let me put it on chat so you guys can see it. Here it is. That is the link to Super Bunny Hop's aging ratings across the world. And has a pretty good solid description of and discussion of rating systems across multiple um, different countries, European Union, China, Japan, etc., and what do they cover or not. um, we also talking about an old game that may be coming back, and that is Splinter Cell. The fans of the mostly single player game, Splinter Cell might be coming back. Ubisoft has been hinting at bringing the game back for a while. Of course, Ubisoft being Ubisoft, if it's not Far Cry, which will be coming out this month in April, I believe Far Cry 5 will be dropping in April, or Assassin's Creed, which came out last year, the latest version of Assassin's Creed, they usually don't do much of anything. Well, except for spin-offs of those games usually.
I was gonna say they also got Rainbow Six.
And Rainbow Six, which again, big multiplayer online game, which comes from the same source as Splinter Cell, because all those games come from the Tom Clancy brand of games, of modern day shooters and what have you. It might happen, but if it does come back, I suspect it will certainly have a big focus on multiplayer.
Yeah, they're more of we'll start seeing more modern video game tropes, I guess.
And talking about other games, somewhat awaited. I heard about this before, but I wasn't really following it. The Fallout 3 revival project has been officially canceled. It essentially was one of these projects that sought to recreate an older game, in this case Fallout 3, Bethesda's Fallout 3, on using the engine for Fallout 4. Apparently, after some discussion with lawyers on both sides, Bethesda informed the makers of the of the mod, or basically a mod, that they could not proceed, not without some serious legal challenges.
Yeah, the issue stems from the creators of the mod wanting to use audio files of voice actors from Fallout 3 directly from the files that you have to buy the game first. So I can see the legal side of that, because that's essentially taking content from one game and making a mod and uploading it for free potentially, or even if you do monetize it yourself, you're kind of infringing on Bethesda's product there. But one of the things I've heard someone mentions is that a lot of the voices they're more of a Hollywood actors, I believe. They're
Mhm.
not traditional video game voice casts. That they're the other issue too stems from those voices being licensed and not necessarily not like in a traditional sense where like, oh, I done my work. I would assume that most video game voice actors are more of like contract works, like, all right, I got paid for my work, and there you go. There's your lines, and the lines I recorded are yours now,
Mhm.
not mine, because I already got paid to do them. So, but I almost feel like that's a kick in the balls to professional voice actors that like non-professional voice actors get to keep the license to their voices and their performances.
Mhm.
Like,
That sounds like an issue for 2 years or so when they get to renegotiate their
yeah.
contract again. Well, I think a voice depends also on the idea of an actor's likeness, right?
Mm,
So if they're bringing somebody who is, I don't know exactly how Bethesda and made the contract per se. I would have to look at the contract,
yeah.
but having a guess is if they hired a specific someone, say for example in San Andreas, I think they hired who was it? Famous, very famous actor, um, who's done a lot of shows and whatnot. Not, but they hired a famous actor, right? And their voice is distinct to them, and so
Yeah.
part of their likeness, right? It's not simply
Like,
their physical appearance.
yeah, like someone from like say David Keith.
Hmm.
I know him from Mass Effect, but that voice is very distinctive. Or oh my god, I'm spacing on the name, the elusive man, Sheen,
Martin Sheen.
Martin Sheen.
Yeah.
Like distinctive. I can't watch Frankie and Grace without thinking of the elusive man.
Yeah. Uh, and it depends on how it's negotiated. I mean, you can, as an actor, just be a voice. I mean, there's professional voice actors, of course, and there is a division of the Actors Guild, which is the union that represents actors in the United States, um, which is about voice acting. But if they came in, also if they came in under a saga contract, a general uh, Screen Actors Guild contract, and not a contract under the voice actors provisions, then again, I mean, it's complicated. We're talking
Yeah.
about areas and in guild rules and whatnot. Guild rules, of course, one of the things that they work very heavily is on contracting, right? That's why you have the guild, so they can negotiate on your behalf, at least some general provisions, especially work ethic and work hours and all that stuff. I can
So
see that happening with it. Well, what's the main actor? There's a very famous actor who does plays the father in. He was the actor who did the Taken movies. Chat, help me out on this.
oh,
Yeah, he plays the father. Liam Neeson.
well,
Liam
there you
Neeson.
go.
Liam Neeson plays the father, and I think the other actors. I don't recognize any other actors as being famous actors, but Liam Neeson is a fairly recognizable voice, at least in that game, and plays a substantial role in it, starting in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
You have the opening where it's his voice mostly, and I think the others are just voice actors, a cast of professional voice actors. But they brought him in. Probably his contract included a clause about his likeness, right? And that's why it has to be licensed. And they either might be an absent provision for replicating that in other works. They might have been a provision say that you have to come back to the booth, so to speak, like you contracted for several hours, and any other work outside of that either has to be renegotiated or he gets paid royalties.
Hmm.
That's why Liam Neeson's voice, once he dies in the spoilers, Fallout 3, once he's gone out of the picture, you don't hear him again. right?
Yeah.
And I think also the person that did the another famous actor, although he's been doing the voice for that for a very long time, who does the introduction, War Never Changes.
Hmm.
He was being actor in in TV series all the way back to Beauty and the Beast in 1980s, and he also played what's his name? Hmm, Guillermo del Toro, one of his movies. It's a DC adaptation. Hellboy.
No.
He played. He worked with Guillermo del Toro in Hellboy, and I'm blanking out on his name. Something Spellman.
Oh boy.
Hellboy. Yeah. Um, Ron Perlman.
There you
Ron
go.
Perlman does the voice. He's been doing the introduction for 3 of the 4 games, and he actually appears in Fallout 4, but not doing the introduction. And he's a man who says war never changes, and does the thing. That's why he became famous for it. In Fallout 4, he is in fact plays a newscaster in the opening of the game, opening sequence of the game. After you get the cinematic introduction, and
So yeah,
he could also.
it,
I don't think he's under that contract, because if they got the rights to his voice when Bethesda got the rights from the people who had the rights before, he could be working under that contract or a modification. Well, of course, contracts can be renewed and remade. Probably that's one of the reasons why he didn't get to say "War never changes" in the opening of Fallout 4. That might be one of the reasons. Instead, he got cast as a newscaster instead. So that's a possibility. Also,
so
perhaps they didn't want to. They wanted to be sort of a standalone and didn't want to have the original game.
yeah,
Or they couldn't make it work because perhaps the changes in the engine and physics of the characters and animations. Fallout 4 is still kind of using the same engine but heavily modified.
yeah.
And so, yeah.
So a lot of issues, and one of the solutions to be brought up is just have someone else re-record those lines, but the creators kind of like, no, those voices are so iconic, and in their personal opinion, they don't think they can get anyone else to kind of hit the right notes
Hmm.
with those voices.
And then finally, you have the Skyrim syndrome.
Oh yeah.
Bethesda has made a lot of money re-releasing Skyrim over and over again. And in fact, I saw Oblivion, a version of Oblivion, on the stores today at what was it, Costco or Sam's Club, for the Xbox One. So,
Really?
yeah.
Hmm.
Basically, I think it just has a card, and they made Oblivion backwards compatible, because
Yeah.
Microsoft has been going ham on backwards compatibility to fill in their their staple of games, right? It's like, oh well,
Yeah.
we don't have new games, so look at all these games you played all the way back to the Lisa 360. Mind you, no backwards compatibility with any game from the Xbox OC era, which is the games I really want to play, right? I would actually think about getting an Xbox One if I could play Robotech again or something like that, just for the hell of it. Oh, I could get my old Xbox that is in my closet here somewhere and fixed. I could try to do that as well. And yeah, so maybe that's what they're doing, right? They've been selling Skyrim over and over and over again. Latest on the Switch, which finally I saw the Switch arrive in Puerto Rico at $2.99, I think it was, or $2.99, yeah, with
That's
tax.
the standard price.
Yeah, but it was like a couple of months ago I could have bought it, but not. Yeah, I'm in the drought on the early part of the year drought. So nope, no money for me for that. But I'll wait. Probably the only console I'll ever buy anyway. If I buy a console again with the
And then of course,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and then of course now we finally got the news about Anthem.
Oh, but before we go to Anthem, because that's very interesting, we did talk about Activision, right? Yes, we covered Activision, and Battle Royale. But we talk about also Final Fantasy VII, who also seems to be in trouble. And this time around, it seems to be in trouble, and that's a good segue to Anthem as well. We'll get to that piece of news because apparently they don't have key people. They haven't hired the kind of key people for their core team in order to make the game. And they've been
Yeah,
promising a Final Fantasy VII for more than 7 years. I mean, a
and
remake, of course.
yeah, and officially it got announced 3 years ago.
Yeah. So uh, I
Yeah, and then they apparently don't like the look of the game that they've released, like some footage
mm,
and some screenshots. Apparently, they don't like the direction it's going, so they kind of want to scrap it and start over again.
which would be the third time because there was an the announcement we got 3 years ago was I think 5 years removed from an earlier announcement of a remake of Final Fantasy VII. So they've been promising Final Fantasy VII coming back for a very long time, and the reason, of course, is that that's the game of the Final Fantasy series that is being huge in the West, particularly the United States. If anybody
Yeah.
has played a Final Fantasy game in the West, it's been Final Fantasy 7, and most people started with 7 and then gone to 8, 9, 10, 11, 11 and a half, 11 3 quarters, 12, 12 and 2/5, and 15 and 3.5 something other, or 3.75. Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts are the same. They have all these bizarre numbers, or algebra
Spin-offs and stuff.
spin-offs and algebraic formula stacked at the end of the name. So it's like 3.75 A2B standard deluxe non-edition.
Bizarro Latin terms or
Yeah.
pseudo Latin terms.
So yeah, we've been waiting on that one.
Yeah, and of course, I think a few years ago they kind of teased us with, "Oh, look, it's Final Fantasy VII for the PlayStation 4, which is just the original PlayStation 1 version, just kind of updated and for the PlayStation 4."
And yeah, and there's also a lot of talk about the fact that it would be split in 2 parts.
Yeah, it was gonna be episodic.
But a lot of people were like, nope. But maybe they were like, okay, this is too. People are too angry about it, and they didn't want to. For example, they had a fiasco with Final Fantasy 14 where they had to relaunch, and now it's being very successful. One of the few truly subscription-based MMOs out there that is really doing well, outside of World of Warcraft, and even World of Warcraft's taken a huge hit after many years being in the market, over 10 years now. I think they're going to celebrate their 15th-year anniversary probably next year or a year after that. I'm not really sure, but soon. And now, and we have Final Fantasy 15, which dropped this month for the PC. So maybe they're looking at like, we have to do better for Final Fantasy 7. Maybe they're thinking about using Final. Probably I think that the idea is that they're thinking of doing Final Fantasy 7 not simply to bring it back as a reboot, but really as a reintroduction of Final Fantasy 7 to the West. Right?
Maybe.
I think that's the bigger goal. I think that's why they're like, we have to get this right. And that's why they might have some problems. But got laid off some people, got some people new, restarting from the beginning, etc., etc. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Amazing 3000. And that segues to Anthem, because we got some news about Anthem as well, and that I believe, and I'm gonna mess up the the last name is Drew Karspinky. I knew I was gonna do it. Karspician.
Drew...
Let me see.
Karspisen.
Yeah.
We'll just call him Drew.
He was one of the writers for Mass Effect, especially Mass Effect 2, which was popularly acclaimed, but he left early on the development of Mass Effect 3, and then got back again on Andromeda, and then left. And those two games have been known to have problems with their story. he got back. No, actually, yeah, he got
Yeah.
back now again for Anthem and left yet again. And well, alongside other people leaving Anthem relatively early, it's a bit worrisome for the people who have been
Yeah.
looking for Anthem as a thing, right? Because it smacks of the stuff that was happening with Andromeda.
Yeah.
That people came,
Actually,
people went, etc., etc. Go ahead, yeah.
yeah. And I don't think he worked on Andromeda for record. I think he came back, or it looks like he might have left while he was working on Star Wars: The Old Republic, and then left, and then came back and started working on Anthem.
Mm.
But yeah, he seems to be pretty heavily entrenched with a Mass Effect 1 and especially 2, as you mentioned.
He also wrote 2 books connected to Mass Effect 2,
3.
which 3 books, and but those books had mixed reception. And he by his statements that he's made publicly, he feels like he's first and foremost a fiction writer,
Yeah.
and second a writer for video games. Now, just to clarify this, video games, especially writers, get hired pretty early on production. They do their thing, mostly scripts. They write scripts that voice actors will then act upon, and some other work, maybe do a sort of a treatise, or a kind of a booklet on what the world is and the races, the work by
Yeah.
graphic designers and the like, and then they leave. Their job is mostly done, because having a full-time writer on the team just sitting around, just there so you can consult him, every so often, it's not cost effective, even in AAA companies. Although BioWare is one of the few companies that has people on staff, they have writers on staff, because most of their games are, not all of their games, up to this point, are heavily based on narrative. They have strong narrative components. But again, we have news of other people leaving Anthem early on, and also very interesting. The person that came back about 2 months ago,
Casey Hudson.
was Casey Hudson. It seems that the two of them can't be in share the same space for too long. And warning, this is rumor only. So I'm rumor mongering. If you want to accuse me of rumor mongering, that's exactly what I'm doing. You will not be wrong, Chad, if you say that I'm rumor mongering. That's what I'm about to do. Okay. Rumor has it. One of the almost has got to the point of being a video game urban legend, that the ending of Mass Effect 3 essentially was written by Casey Hudson and someone else. Nobody gets mentioned who it is.
It was Casey Hudson and Mark Walter.
And Mark Walter, they basically...
Or Mac Walter.
Mac Walter. They went into a room, they wrote the ending, they didn't tell anybody else, they didn't consult with anybody else, they came out, here's the ending. And that's been the sort of critique from people in BioWare. Of course, it's a rumor because these are people who don't, these aren't unnamed sources speaking behind the scenes, etc., to, games journalists who are not above peddling rumors, let's be honest, just to get for clickbait and all that. I wish that wasn't the case, but some people have stronger sources than others.
Yeah, I think you're onto something, because it seems like Drew was pretty instrumental in what Mass Effect is, along with Casey Hudson.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah, I have my issues with Mass Effect 2, but it's a fun game. The story's interesting. It, as a trilogy, it doesn't quite fit in.
Mm-hmm.
But at the very least, the writing sound, and Mass Effect 3, it's hard to say if it would have been better if Drew stuck around and maybe kept Casey and Mac like reeled in and maybe grounded a little more. But Maybe
Although
not.
although he's the one I got on record saying that he had the dark energy ending for Mass Effect. That his
Yeah,
ending was the dark energy ending, which, to be honest, is not
it-
really that much better
not
than
that much better, but
yeah. Because it's the problem was not the dark energy aspect per se. It's the whole the
it,
premise of the ending itself, though, how they arrived to it. It's like what. But we're not gonna get into that because, of course, that would be
that's a
a
well, yeah, that's a well. We just keep falling into.
yeah.
But yeah, so and of course, Drew has said, don't read too much into my leaving. You people are going to speculate, but it's really I'm leaving because I want to go do other things that don't involve being working on Anthem, or I don't have the time to work on Anthem.
But let's be honest, I'm a writer, and I'm gonna tell you, being a writer, that one of the first things that they told you when writers like, oh, I want to write, I want to make a career out of writing. The first thing a lot of established writers tell you is like, don't leave your day job.
Hmm.
Something has to pay the bills. And
So
yeah,
he,
you can, and I don't want to, I don't want to call him. I guess I am calling him out, right? Like, you know what? The reason why you might have been working for BioWare and EA is because they paid you the bills. They gave you the actual checks every month while you were working with them. Writing a book and hoping that the book sells well, etc. That's not the same thing,
no,
especially
and
when it's your own fiction, right?
yeah, the thing is too is that one could say maybe he found something better, which might be true. He's just not saying that. But
True.
he did say like he wanted to focus on freelancing, and of course we all know freelancing is not guaranteed work.
And also, Mahiba doesn't want to burn his own bridges again. I mean,
Yeah,
he's come back in the past. He's basically said the same thing before, and I get it. I mean, it's corporate, working in corporate, and what their expectations are versus what you want to do on your own. I mean, there's a lot of joy and freedom with doing your own work, right? And
yeah,
I wish him the best.
oh
As
yeah.
a fellow writer, I wish Drew the best, of course. I don't know him
So,
personally.
but as you brought up, like maybe his part might have been done already with Anthem, and he's
Mhm.
laid down all the groundwork in terms of writing. However, you know, we have been down this road before with
Andromeda.
Andromeda, because Andromeda had 5 years of development, but really most of the development took place in the last like what 18 months of its development life cycle,
Hmm.
and most of the people that most of the big names left way before that.
And we have other names that have also left Anthem or have been rumored to be, not happy with Anthem as it's going, and some digs at the audience and whatnot. It smells like, and a lot of people have been predicting also the fall of Bioware, that this is Anthem is make or break,
Yeah,
which, considering how EA treats its properties and subservient companies, um, studios particularly, it's not out of it's not completely out of the, it wouldn't be completely out of the blue or a deviation from EA's past behavior necessarily, as again looking at Andromeda, uh did with the Montreal team, which they folded it into EA Motive, and that was that.
yep.
Enough with Montreal has ceased to exist. And let's be honest, as of right now, and I'm saying this, it makes some Mass Effect fans very angry, but Mass Effect is dead. At least
Yeah,
it's in the, it's like a vampire in a coffin waiting for the sun to go down again. It's been a very long day for the vampire that is Mass Effect. So there's that. And talking about Andromeda by way of Anthem, I played the entire series of Mass Effect, beginning in January, ended up earlier in this month, with Andromeda. And one of the things that I noticed was Andromeda was big, but it suffered from what we in the podcast have termed, I've termed mostly, empty world syndrome. But talking to some other people said, well, it has a lot of content, and I like that. Which brings us to the discussion of tonight. What exactly is content when it comes to video games?
is it the gameplay? Is it the story? Is it the characters?
Well,
What?
what is it? And it could be any of those things or none of the above, right? Because I think today, and also ties in with microtransactions and in-app purchase, all the things that we've been talking in the first half hour or so of the show tie in with this question. Because one of the things I notice, and I think people say, "Oh, open world games, I get my money's worth because I get 60 hours worth of content, so it's like $1 an hour." And it's like, but when I was playing Andromeda, and this goes all the way back to Kingdoms of Amalur, Shadows of Mordor, so not just to rag on Bioware, Andromeda, etc. A lot of this stuff, and the original Mass Effect as well. It was 20 hours. It's close to 30 hours if you're trying to be a completionist and go to all the planets. But again, a lot of this stuff came to a point where it felt like busy work. Yep. It felt like it was the stuff that is there because of the stuff that you put in this type of game, right? It's just,
it's stuff if you really want to play the game again, you'll skip over a second playthrough because it's not what you're there for.
Yeah, but if you skip it, it kind of feels like you haven't really played the game because there's all the stuff that is there. It's like sort of intruding. Like in the middle of Andromeda, and I'm basically spoiling it for a little bit for our friend Chapelman, who will probably be playing it on the anniversary of Andromeda this month, next week, right? It's
next week.
He's gonna do a 24-hour marathon. I wish you the best, my friend. I really do.
I have a feeling my face is going to be very tired.
We're gonna have that meme come back again. One of the things that happened in that game was that by the middle of it, I felt like I was zigzagging. Like I was going here and I was going there and I go here, there, and I went to a planet and I would do the same 3 things over again. Like it's like an MMO, right? It's a grind. It's the give me thy 30 bear asses, right? It's like pick up 5 things here, and some of them had some interesting tidbits to them. But it got to a point where, again, it happened in many games, I sort of get tired of it, and I go like, whatever. I just want to go to the end. I just want to finish the game. Mm-hmm. But this comes from somebody who, if I were to look at, I'm not going to do that because it's going to mess up with my with my internet. And if I start opening Steam and all that, because my internet is pretty fiddly. If I were to go to Steam, in PC alone, I have 200, 300, 400 hours on Steam. Mind you, I modded the hell out of Skyrim. I'm talking about Skyrim vanilla version. I haven't even gone to the new edition, the latest edition. And I got the 2 DLC for it, or 3 DLC, and I spent hundreds of hours playing it. And it has a lot of content. Like yesterday I spent, after I was doing my stream, I spent like a couple of hours just doing this massive quest. If you think about it, it was kind of like me sneaking around, shooting an enemy, sneaking around again, shooting another enemy, blah blah, fighting. But to me, that felt like actual content. Like I was doing stuff. And Skyrim is full of like little caves and stuff like that you can go in and say, well, isn't it the same cave, like the same underground layer, the same dungeon, the same, I don't know, the same tomb. But to me, they kind of feel distinct. Maybe in the way they arrange, maybe the enemy type fine. The fact that I can mod it, so now I have like one of the latest mod I got has like new monsters that showed up. So like I'm walking around, there's a skeletal thing that just starts starting fireballs at me. I was like, oh damn,
Or sometimes the things and the objects that you find in the cave are different. The layout.
Yeah. Or I remember I stumbled upon this, and it may be that game relies a lot on you discovering these things, as opposed to just sort of like, wow, it's there, right? And you go in and you look at the map, and it's just all these points. It's like, oh, go here and go there and do there, and you can do it on your own terms. But one could argue that I'm still playing the same game over and over again, but that feels more like content than something like Andromeda, which I'm driving around and it's very pretty. The graphics are much better, right? The shooting was pretty cool once you get used to it. But it felt like a chore. So I'm gonna ask you. I mean, Chabon, what does to you and to chat? What does content means to you?
I think content to me means that I find enjoyment in every and whatever the game brings offers in terms of gameplay, story, and narrative. It keeps me engaged, and by the time I get to the end, I feel satisfied. Whether it's been 20 hours or whether it's been 60 hours. Or maybe even if I just stop playing in the middle, I'm like, okay, I don't have to play enough. Either I got my fill's worth for now, or I didn't. Then either something's missing. Like one of the games that I'm playing right now is a Digimon Story, Cyber Sleuth Hacker's Memory. It's a fairly long title.
Mm-hmm.
This game is essentially what I would consider a triple A asset flip, because it's essentially a not even really a sequel. It's the second game. It's a sequel in the sense it's the second game following another, but it takes place at the exact same time frame as the first, and in turn it recycles assets and recycles environmental assets, characters, and yeah, that's about it. There's very little in terms of new content, but it's the same gameplay. I'm being entertained. I'm finding a lot of enjoyment just playing this game, even if the story is so contrived and makes very little sense. Character motivations are bizarre,
Mm-hmm.
but I am finding myself interesting. I wouldn't call it a very great game in terms, although I am kind of finding myself kind of skipping a lot of the content, which is the random encounters and just the boss fights now, because I'm kind of like, okay, I'm getting a little tired of. I've been through a lot of this before because I have played the second game or the first game. Of course, something good that this game does is it has an import feature. So
Mm-hmm.
if you've already got a lot of the content, you're a completionist like me. If you already got all the content and done everything in there, it transfers over.
Mm-hmm.
So you just have to kind of discover a lot of the new stuff that they added in,
Mm-hmm.
which honestly isn't all that much that they added in.
Yeah, I think also.
But
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, but I'm still I am finding that there is a bit of a grind to it, and in terms of some of the new features they added, it's like, oh, it's great that they added these features, but then I hit the point where it's starting to become repetitive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, it's a grind because I keep fighting the same people over and over and with no new content.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me. I on one game I played recently. I think was I finished it the last week. It was pretty short. Was Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. I love that little game. I mean, it's about 10 hours at most. Pretty short. It's based on Far Cry 3, which again, Far Cry 3 I didn't like the way they did the story wise, a bit fan fisted. Um, but in Far Cry 3, you have two islands. You have this big island, and then you have a second island. By the time I hit the second island, it was like, because what I like to do is just sort of conquer the island. I like the idea of sort of clearing the area and conquering it and sneaking around and clearing all the bases and all that. I love that idea, and I like doing it. But by the time I got in the second island, I just felt like I was gonna do all that all over again, and I was like, I really don't want to do that. There wasn't really
Yeah.
enough differentiation. But I played Blood Dragon, which most of the bases are kind of they're kind of the same. Such that now they look like metal fortresses as opposed to like huts with barbed wire in the middle of nowhere, right? Like converted gas stations or something like that, which is what happens in Far Cry 3. And that felt a lot of fun because I could sneak in, or I could call in a blood dragon to just mess up everybody else. I could go in guns blazing, whatever. But it was short enough because I got most of the upgrades. I want to do this because I want to get the upgrades and stuff like that. I could skip what I wanted. I think that's another thing about content, and we kind of talk about it, is like, is it really skippable, right? Because if it feels like you have to do it, then and you're not enjoying, you're doing the grind because you have a
Yeah.
leveling system that you have to get the points in order to get stronger, to do this or that. then it's actual content in the files, I suppose. It's stuff you can do, but it
But
doesn't it feels,
yeah,
I don't know, it just feels
and
like it's
even then, games are honestly repetitive, but I think that's the point. The point I was trying to make is that if the game doesn't make you feel like you're it doesn't draw attention to its repetitiveness, I think it's doing it correctly
Mhm.
because you're being entertained even though you might actually just be doing the same thing over and over. Maybe it's just slightly different, or
Mhm.
maybe it's in a new location, or maybe the story is engaging enough to make you want to get through that grind. And also, it maybe the grind doesn't overstay its welcome. The game is just the right length. It's not too long. It's not too short. It's just satisfying enough. And I think that's a lot of issues with, say, games like a lot of Ubisoft's library nowadays. They feel like they need to keep you in their world for you to I guess, buy it.
Mhm.
Feel like you're getting your money's worth, but really it's not all that interesting. I can remember playing Assassin's Creed 2. Yeah, the cities are pretty and they're big, but they're just kind of there. I've never really found myself like stopping and looking at every single thing out of fun.
Mhm.
I just, oh, look, there's another point in my map. I got to go over there and go do the thing because it gives me points for my completionist. Or I got to pick up this feather.
Yeah, and that's again going to Andromeda, particularly in comparison to Blood Dragon. In Andromeda, and we talked about this before about Miley's my three things that story should do, and one of them is give structure. And just like in the original Mass Effect, there's a point where he's like, "Oh, you want to finish the game? Okay, here's the ending sequence. Go and do it, right? If you want to, like, press this button and the game will end."
Yeah.
But you feel like the rest of the game was still here, right? I still have my companions that I'm getting the loyalty to, and I wanted to do some other things, but I felt like, oh, I could, you kind of want me to go there, but there's other things
Yeah.
I want to do. The story itself, and there's something for criticism of Fallout 4 too, that the story didn't provide both motivation and particularly structure. Or,
Yeah.
at one point it had conflicting motivations. The story wants you to do one thing, but the gameplay wants you to do another, and it doesn't provide the structure. Like going back, we were talking about Mass Effect 2. One of the things that, yeah, there's a lot of these little side quests. You can skip them, right? But they're fun. They're very short. There's like one little map. You go, you kill 5, 6 guys. You do that, and each map is a little bit different, so it has its own challenges. And also, it ties in as part of the suicide mission the loyalty of your team members. So
Hmm.
if you want to unlock more powers and abilities, and you really want to get your team members in a story wise, like, oh, I'm there for the story, you better do these side quests, right? And the side quests are fun, and they're kind of little vignettes, really narrative wise. Oh, you go to this place, you can say who Jack is doing and what they're doing, etc., like that, and that's it, right? Um, and the DLC, for example, of going back to Kingdoms of Amalur, they were pretty focused, right? You could do a
Yeah.
couple of things, and there were a bunch of things you could do, but you felt like you accomplished most of it, because I'm not a completionist, right? Um, and I I had to literally, when I was playing Andromeda, say, okay, I'm in this planet. I'm gonna clean up this planet of most of the stuff so I can move on. And even then, the side quests are like, oh, by the way, you have to go back to the planet to do this one thing, like talk to this one person, or pick up this thing, so you then go to another planet, and it's like, could we just not do everything in one place and move on? I think Dragon Age Inquisition was good in that you went to a place, you could do most of the stuff and move on, and maybe return for one or two things, like basically turn in the quest,
Yeah.
and
Or
that
like,
was it.
or try to access an area that might have way too powerful of enemies for you to have
Yeah,
gone there at the time.
but that you felt like you sort of completed the area, and the areas felt, I guess because also you're on foot and stuff like that, you felt like you can actually were doing things like, oh, by the way, there's this one thing I found in the middle. That's another thing. It's like, how do you position the content? Because if you're walking around and you just find the content by exploring, by doing that, that kind of feels more natural than I'm here and I look around. There's like 20 people who want my attention, and I'm talking around. It's like, hey, can you help me? It's like, no, but I'm busy doing this other thing. Could I just do that first,
Yeah.
right? Right. And when you do things like the main quest, I think the difference. I don't want to spoil too much, at least on stream, because even though it's a game that's been a year old, this one's a minor but significant spoiler. What happens in the end? Uh, but it really doesn't really change that much, right? Yeah, it changes the flavor of the ending, as opposed to if you do a lot of these side quests and decide to any of these side things, rather than the actual ending itself, right?
Yeah.
It's not like again like a suicide mission where people live and die and whatnot. I think you have some people live or die and bring people in or not, but it's more for flavor than anything else. Um, and you could do the main story mission and come back, but the game again, once I finished the game, I was like, I just want to do busy work. No, I got a bunch of other games I could be
Yeah.
playing instead of this. So yeah, it does. It yes, a lot. There's a lot of stuff there, but how is the range? How do I get there? What are the incentives? Is it something I discover versus something that's just feels like I'm running around? I mean, I guess because I played a lot of World of Warcraft in my day, I know all those people standing around the corners here. They're just quest givers. Like, and you can recognize a quest giver from a mile away. And also, some of the quests were designed so you had to go in a vehicle and then jump here and do that. So you spend a lot of time just running around in circles, just finding stuff, right? And then there's a lot of things. There's a lot of trash mobs, like what happened in Kingdoms of Amalur when you're in the end. Literally, I was running down to the end. It took me like about an hour and a half or 2 hours just running. It was like run, meet a trash mob, kill the
Yeah.
mob, move to the next mob, kill them, move to, and there were caves and stuff like that. It was like I don't want to
Yeah.
go there. I just
And
want to
it's
end.
usually, yeah, and it's usually NPCs. Oh, we can't get through this trash mob. Could you help us?
It's like yeah. So it's kind of like that. There's a lot of repetitive trash mobs in Andromeda. It's like at first like oh yeah these are enemies, but then like the 15th time and the third or fourth planet is like where the hell are these people coming from?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I've seen some of those. They're like, oh no, a random ship just stops by and drops off enemies and starts attacking us.
Yeah, and it isn't again going another comparison in Skyrim like when a dragon shows up because the
Yeah.
dragon is a boss fight. It may not be a great boss fight if you're pretty high level. It can be just a weakened dragon, but it's like oh my god the dragon is here and you're like okay I got to deal with the dragon and you get something out of the dragon. It's interesting and there's mods that make fighting the dragons
Yeah.
even more important and stuff like that.
And it's also fun to see, like, it's not just, oh, it's not like you and in the middle of a city and a dragon shows up and no one reacts to it. It's like, oh, it's just you hacking away at the dragon. Everyone reacts to it. It's like, oh no, a dragon. Let's all either run away or fight it and get ourselves killed.
And you can actually lose key NPCs if they
Yeah.
get killed by the dragon, or vampires could show up, or werewolves can show up. It's like, and there's actually I put a mod to stamp out the vampires because I was like they're gonna kill everybody that I care about here, so might as well keep, reduce them. But they still kind of show up, right? And a dragon call jumps like, and sometimes what cool things happen is that a vampire is gonna show up and a dragon can show up. And so the vampires are fighting the dragon, and the dragon is fighting the guards. And you're like, okay, do I fight the vampires? Do I fight the guards? Maybe some ghosts show up. I mean, it could be just a clusterfuck, but it's kind of like, okay, this is interesting. Where again, a lot of the sort of non-content, it just feels like it's there because that's what you do. It's like, oh, there's this crevice. Of course, there's 5 guys with guns waiting for me to kill me. Oh, here's a door. Here's a village because that's where you put the village, and you gotta clean that base because that's where you put it. It feels it pulls you out of the experience.
If it feels too artificial, because then you'll come into an areas like, oh look, chest high walls and cover that I'm like, I'm probably gonna get ambushed here.
What was that game? It was a shooter, sci-fi shooter with classes. A single player had two. Basically it's a sort of basically it was a make, and the second game was basically a remake of the original, and also had a couple of had a game by Telltale Games. Drew a blank. The people who made Aliens, Colonial Marines,
Oh, Borderlands.
Borderlands. When I didn't play Borderlands 2 because Borderlands was at first like, oh, this is a lot of fun, but it's like I was literally getting the same guns. That
Yeah,
it was like, oh, there's thousands of guns. Yeah, it's the same gun with the similar higher stats and a different. No, this one spits acid and that one spit fire and that kind of stun. But it's like it's a loot mill situation where I don't feel like just going through
yeah.
the motions, right?
That was my issue with it too, and the environments didn't really. It's sort the premise seemed interesting, but then it's just kind of like, oh, this is gonna be a grind. I'm like, nah.
Yeah, I
I
finished it, and then the ending wasn't that great. You had some cool NPCs here and there and stuff like that, but there were not enough of them everywhere to go like, yeah, I want to keep playing. And I was like, oh, Borderlands 2 is out, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna go with Yahtzee's description of this. It's you going around an alien planet from one junkyard to another, killing the same crazy people stuck that live in a junkyard
Yep.
over and over and over and over again. And again, video games are very repetitive, but you gotta put something on it that sort of makes it interesting. A new enemy or a new location or some lore or something like that, right? The planets in Andromeda are very pretty. But
Yeah.
even then, they're kind of repetitive because I found two planets that looked like somebody had taken an ocean and emptied it.
Hmm.
So it looked like the trees and the mountains looked like they were coral, stuff like that, and there were two planets that were desert. And then another planet that was not a desert, but it was a tundra. But it was you running around in instead of ice dunes, in snow drifts instead of sand dunes.
Sand dunes.
So it's like, yeah, I guess I'm doing the same thing, right? And then that's another thing about Andromeda is that if a lot of these planets took the idea from Mass Effect that some planets were toxic and if you were outside you would take damage or whatever. If you stand too
Hmm.
long, you got die, and they kind of do it that for all the planets, which at first is pretty cool. Again, it's like, oh, I gotta solve this problem, but it's like, oh, this planet also has the same problem, and this other
Yeah.
planet has the same problem. And how do I fix it? I gotta go do the three things I gotta do, and yeah,
Instead of like in the original where you don't fix the environments that you end up in, you just have to have the right equipment to be able to work in there. Maybe that equipment requires you to sacrifice shielding or health regen.
I didn't even never bother getting any special equipment. I would just go like,
Is
okay, I just don't
well,
stay out, don't stay outside too long and shoot the enemies, and go back to my rover and do it all over again. And
yeah,
and my rover doesn't have a gun.
yeah.
That's the
Well,
one the new rover Andromeda is pretty cool, but it doesn't have a gun. I'm like,
yeah.
hmm.
Well, as their special equipment, or like, oh, you're going to a toxic world, you better buy this special suit over here.
It has mods, but not really something that. Well, I didn't actually get into my. I don't want to get too much into Andromeda, but that's just an example of. Yeah, this just again feels repetitive. Repetitive. It feels like it's there just to be there, and I think that's the fatal flaw of all this content that we're getting these days. It doesn't feel like real. It doesn't feel like I'm paying for something new and exciting that I want to do. It feels like the kind of things that again they're there because you have to have something there.
Yeah, and I think the issue can work in the opposite. It's where something you buy set a set game and then it tries a little too hard to be too much of a game. Like
Mm-hmm.
it puts a little too much effort in. Like, oh no, you might get bored. We better put a little more combat simulations between our stories, or oh no, we gotta put you in some action scene. Like I think of Telltale games that do that. It's like, oh no, we've gone like 5 minutes without something happening. It's like, oh, quick, let's throw a quick time event at you.
Yeah. So we reached the bottom of the hour, and we talked about content. Um, I don't really think we have anything more to add to it. Well, we are actually adding way too repetitive content to the podcast as it is. So we better stop here before wear our welcome. So before we go, Chapamon, can you tell the audience, lovely audience, where we can find you on the interwebs?
So you can find me at Chapelmon pretty much anywhere. I'm Chapelmon at YouTube. I'm Chapelmon _ Aragon at YouTube and Twitter. I'll actually be streaming Mass Effect Andromeda 24-hour stream starting at midnight my time, which is Arizona time. We don't do daylight savings time, so look it up.
What's the date?
Date will be the 20th.
20th, next week on Wednesday.
Wednesday at midnight.
And I am here on Lessons Learned 1. The 1 is very important, otherwise you're going to miss it. On Twitch and Lessons Learned on YouTube. And also Rafael Writer on Twitter. I got to put all those into the one banner, branding and all that. And I'm currently playing Deus Ex Human Revolution: Director's Cut until Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition drops and or Battle Tech the game drops, which will be the 2 upcoming games. And then I'll probably go back to finishing Deus Ex if I feel like it. So if you want to follow the adventures of Comrade Jensen and the socialist revolution of the future, join me at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and then again every day except today, of course, tonight, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time and 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Fridays. So thank you for coming, and we'll see you when we see you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye. And that, as they say,